Welcome back to the Wellbeing in Practice podcast, bringing you the latest in complementary, integrative, and functional medicine conversations. I'm Tanya Borowski, Head of Education here at Amrita, and your host. And today I have with me another wonderful colleague, Sandra Greenbank, who is a fellow nutritional therapist, also fully certified IFM practitioner, and has and specializes in fertility and has established the most wonderful, deserved reputation for this area and has just paved the way in training also other nutritional therapists in specializing in this area. So I'm sure you will all be really thrilled to hear my conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Sandra.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, Sandra, why did you choose to specialize in fertility when you decide to do that immediately after you qualified as an NT, or did it take a little while for that sort of to resonate?
I actually wrote my business plan at the end of my studies based on fertility.
Wow.
Practice.
Okay.
And this is back in 2009 when nobody really specialized in anything. It was just not a thing.
No.
Weren't taught to do that, but I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I, having grown up with parents battling sort of chronic health problems,
Okay.
diabetes and, metabolic issues and all lots of different things actually. I just believed intuitively that changing families, how families live and eat is the key to public health, because you kind of take with you what you learn from home and you pass it on to your family. And, so that was kind of, I wanted to work with families and building healthy families.
Beautiful.
And yeah, for me, family has always been the only thing that matters. And so just looking after families generally, I think is where I wanted to go. And I did have some patients in clinic during my studies who were trying to conceive, and they were just the most rewarding ones, obviously getting that, that the message that they've conceived is like,
Amazing.
there's nothing better.
No, I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to, but this line of work, it is a roller coaster of emotions that you as a practitioner also have to hold. So that is not to be understated. And I know that you work with, well, you've just said family is all that matters to you. That's integral. So I know that when you practice, you see both parties and as many members of the family as you can and that's what you believe is really important.
Yeah, and I want to sort of say that, you're still a family if you don't have a baby. Like, having a baby doesn't make you a family,
No.
sort of. But I think that, a much wanted baby to arrive in into a family home where it's been such a long and hard road. And, and also I think that over time as well, I cannot even tell you how many times I've heard people say, I wish I'd come to you sooner. I wish I'd come to you 10 years ago. I wish I didn't have those 9 cycles of IVF. I would have saved like £100,000. Like, all that is just so. And so I think
Wow.
this spurs you on more and more every time. And I know that that's probably the same with any niche that you're working in. It's so rewarding, but it's almost like it kind of snowballs, doesn't it?
Yes. So actually that really segues into a question that's been ruminating my mind. You mentioned IVF and the amount, and sort of you've said you've heard people say to you hundreds and hundreds of times, what do they wish they'd come to see you sooner? What do you see are the gaps in sort of fertility support, both sort of in, so to me as a there you obviously we have the NHS, which we know is on its knees, which we would call the mainstream health model. But then we have this sort of extreme sort of having to pay for IVF clinic model. What do you see the gaps are in those models?
Well, I think that first of all, the GP clinic is, they're so limited in what they can do. And they run some basic tests, but they don't necessarily know how to interpret those a lot of the time. And I think you might get a diagnosis of PCOS, or you might get a diagnosis of whatever it is, and then the answer is,
that's the reason. Yeah.
we're going to refer you to a fertility clinic, but they're not fertility clinics. They're IVF. They sell IVF, and I know you
Right.
can get treatment on the NHS. If you're very, very lucky, you'll qualify for some treatment, but you might get one round or you might get several, but even so, you have to get to the root cause, don't you? Because IVF is kind of like just that sticking plaster. Your body, I think, a lot of the time is doing what it's supposed to be doing in any given situation. So if you're under extreme stress, or you've got some infection, or there's something else environmentally going on that's impacting one of the two, usually it's two people trying together, but not always, but one of you, then your body's going to respond potentially by downregulating ovulation, and we have to find out what's going on, and that neither the GP surgery or the IVF clinic is ever going to do that. And if they do find something like PCOS, for example, they're just going to they're not going to deal with the root cause. They're just going to stick something on top to sort of force your body into doing something it's not ready to do or is not able to do naturally.
Yes.
And
yep.
It's traumatic anyway to have the treatment without also being sort of almost assaulted by sort of all the hormones and whatever it is that needs. And a lot of the time as well, I mean, PCOS is such a big thing, and there's lots of different drivers for PCOS, but one of the issues that people are facing is trouble losing weight. The majority of people with PCOS anyway, and in my experience. And then what they get told is that to qualify for IVF, they have to get their BMI under a certain
Oh
number.
my God, that's brutal.
Yeah, and so they go, off you go, lose some weight, and then we'll see if you qualify. And then these people have tried to lose weight all their life.
Of course.
They get no support, and then what they do is they will do the only thing that has ever worked for them, or whatever sort of they obviously look online and find out what's working for other people, and it tends to be kind of high level of HIIT, keto, or starving yourself, and just
Gosh.
get that number. And then the clinic are very happy because you've reached the BMI that they want you in, but obviously your body's then gone, this is just awful, we're starving, we're running away from a dangerous animal.
Yep.
Because those signals are just telling your brain that this is not a good time to have a baby. So it's just all
Absolutely.
and also it completely misses the point of actually, if you're a female trying with a male partner, the male partner is, I think sometimes actually getting a diagnosis is a bad thing, because it's almost like you're chasing that one thing, and it's not always the thing that's stopping you from getting pregnant.
I totally see how you frame that and can totally understand that. It's this sort of, we're caught up very much in this society of labels, aren't we? In whichever, and so there is the way that we've been taught, if you like, is that the healthcare model, if we can find the label, if we can find the name, then we have a solution for that. So that's going to fix the problem. But absolutely, as you've said, I mean, ultimate at its very fundamental core, the female body is set up in homeostasis to reproduce. So if it can't, absolutely, it's protecting itself from whatever the insult or insults are, and until those are removed, it's going to be very difficult to actually to achieve that goal, however many hormones you chuck at it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think obviously that's particularly if there's an ovulatory disorder or problem, because, that is, unless the ovaries have failed or struggling for some other reason, like there's an infection or there's antibodies, or, I have seen clients who've gone into menopause from having a really severe case of the flu, and that's not a lifestyle thing. That's
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
lots of different things and can be going on. But I think that we have to look at what is going on, and this concept of unexplained infertility we need to just stop using that term. It's unexplored, not unexplained.
Oh, I love that. Unexplored. I love that.
It should never be unexplained. It should never be not explained. We just need to look further. And obviously, as functional medicine practitioners, we have so many more tools that we can use to
We do.
look for what might be going on than the sort of very narrow and limited things that they tend to use, or they actually even have access to in IVF clinics, or certainly NHS GP surgeries. There's just so much that needs to happen. And I think, looking at nutrient levels for starters, it's such a simple thing, but like vitamin D is so low in so many people. Generally, the methylating nutrients can be really, really low. If you've been on the pill for a long time, or you've been under extreme stress, or, you lived 10 years of your life having a party lifestyle and focusing on your career, that's what, it's normal. That's what we do. And it's what we're probably supposed to do in our 20s and, early 30s. But all of that is going to have an impact if you're not focusing and also putting back those nutrients. So sometimes it's just a case of looking at what's going on there. Sometimes it's making sure that there are no infections that's impacting sperm quality, or the ability to stay pregnant. There's just so many things that really needs to be looked at and ruled
Sure.
out before treatment, I think. And I'm not anti-IVF, or artificial reproductive technologies, but I think that they're massively overused, and a lot of the problem is it's such a big industry, and there's the investors have. I've had a few conversations with some quite open clinic owners and directors, across the world, and they're saying that embryologists are given KPIs by the board, and they're saying we want repeat cycles. So repeat cycles is the thing. So you'll be, as an embryologist, you'll be told that if you're not having enough repeat cycles, or you're not booking enough people in, you're not doing your job properly. So the focus is not on.
Oh my God. My jaw is on the desk for anyone. That is
There was a Bloomberg,
awful.
I think, last year that outlined this, and it's a big problem with the industry itself. So there's just so much that goes into, IVF clinics have all these extras that they recommend, and obviously extras, it's all profit at the end of the day. You are caught in this situation where you don't really know. You don't know if they're recommending it because of your personal situation, or because it's a nice little added extra where you could get, and some countries are worse than where we are. I mean, I've had clients actually in America, and I've told them to come here for their treatment, because they would tell me that they were like on the bed with the legs in the stirrups, and then somebody would come in and say, you need this treatment, there's $1,000, can you sign this paper? Waiting for their egg collection, and just horror stories. But so I'm always really kind of in favor of people asking lots and lots and lots of questions to inform themselves about the decisions that's being made about their treatment. And if a clinic is kind of fobbing you off or not wanting to discuss these things with you, I think it's probably a good idea to change clinics to one that will have that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why are you recommending this specifically for me?
Yeah. Because, and also, yeah, when you're in a state of anxiety, when you're in fear, if you're being fed, then we're incapable of making rational decisions. It's not, we sort of are being driven by cortisol. And if you've got your legs in the stirrups, then that is not time to be asking somebody to make a rational decision about whether, and is this treatment do they really need it?
Yeah,
It's criminal.
but I think that generally you are already in that situation because you've got this ticking time bomb
Yeah.
on sitting on your ovaries, and you're thinking, if I don't do this cycle this month or next month, it might be too late. So you're already in that state of like fear and worry, and forking out fortunes that you probably don't really have, and not knowing if it's going to work. And then we come in and we go, oh, you should be don't do that, do this, or and then we're always sort of trying to get people to sort of wait a bit, give me
Yeah.
3 months, let
Yeah.
me let me look at what's going, and then it's such a tricky, it's really a difficult place to be. And it's hard to navigate for the patient, let alone anybody else is trying to help them.
It really is, which sort of leads me into sort of asking, I'd like to talk to you about when you've mentioned sort of treatments and testing. I'd like to talk to you about methylation and MTHFR. But I'd just like to sort of circle back in terms of everything that you've just been talking about is just so evident to me, that if you're going as as a nutritional therapist, if you're wanting to work in this, if you're wanting to work in this line of sort of specialize, that it really does require sort of drilling down and specialist work, because the lens, we can practice functional medicine, but the lens is, as is always the case, just slightly different when you're looking at fertility. And I have experienced quite a lot of practice. I think the colleges now are really encouraging and sort of trying to encourage students as soon as they've qualified to specialize.
Mhm.
And I feel there's a real fear for me in that, is because you can't specialize in women's health or in fertility. Just you've got to you've got to do an awful lot more training to be able to understand that. And actually the GPs are the same, is that they're general practitioners, but they don't understand. A lot of them who haven't done additional training don't understand the nuances of looking at a blood test or looking at different markers through that specific lens. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that you, I mean, you can't be a specialist until you've worked with
No.
it's tricky, isn't it? Because you can't, if you find yourself newly qualified, of course you should go out and work with people. But I worry that if you're working with something as important as all health problems are important, but with fertility we're time limited. People don't have
Yeah.
time. Usually they've sort of almost run out of time by the time they come to us, because it's taken so take that process takes a while. And you can't just come out of college and be a specialist in fertility.
No.
And you can't, even if you've had treatment yourself, if you've gone through fertility problems yourself, you're going to have a much better understanding than somebody who hasn't. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible to know everything
Yeah.
from the outset. And so I think working with a mentor or somebody who can help support you, just making sure that you're not missing any gaps, making sure that you're covered, all the important areas. And I think that nothing prepares you to work with two people, which I always would
Oh,
recommend.
that's a very good point. Yeah.
If you can get hold of both people, sometimes one partner doesn't want to come. Sometimes you're stuck with using frozen sperm or a donated egg. But you should look at the whole picture, which is two people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. That it's a very different skill set. It's a very different, nuanced skill set to be working with two people.
Yeah. And if you're working with one partner, you're only working with 50%.
Yeah.
And male fertility, I mean, men are usually the ones that are sort of less likely to come, although they're much more likely to come to see us now than they were 10 years ago.
Right.
But if they don't, male fertility problems are so common, it's huge, and it's getting worse fast. And modern life, plastics, pollution, tight trousers, although that's not so much of a fashion anymore, but
No, not
fashionable.
not looking at the way that my daughter's generation dress. No, that isn't an issue. But yeah, joking aside, there is that's very interesting that you have seen that you've observed in the last decade, or even shorter than that, that your experience is that male fertility has suffered quite dramatically.
Well, I see more men now, or we see as a group at the Fertility Nutrition Centre, much more than I used to maybe 10 years ago. But also the data is clear. The studies are clear. It's going downhill fast. And the WHO have actually revised their parameters for what normal is down.
Okay. Wow.
I think 2010 and then 2021. So each time it's like normal, because normal is based on a sort of group.
Of course, normal was what was a cohort a decade ago. Yeah.
So it's going down, and there's a lot of research that shows that it's not good news for men. But I think it's to do with this pollution, dioxins, plastics. We're so exposed to it now everywhere. Diet, lifestyle. Also a lot of men cycle a lot. It's quite trendy now to cycle a lot, which I think is good, for exercise, obviously, but you are squishing your testicles, heating them up, and you're also potentially cycling and sort of you're breathing in a lot of pollution if you're cycling on roads.
Yeah.
That's still a big issue. And I think it's important, but also the dynamics between a couple can be quite difficult to navigate as well, because you've got one person who's read all the books and read all the blogs and changed all their diet, and then you've got one person who's like being dragged there and sitting there with their arms folded,
arms crossed. Yeah.
and you're having to sort of go, if you do your bit, it's going to relieve the tension. It's going to be, the other partner is almost becomes like the fertility police, and it's like, don't keep your laptop on your lap, don't drink, so and so you can change the dynamics between the couple by doing that job for the other partner sometimes, but also it can be difficult to navigate that as well, and just reassuring actually as well. I'm saying we should work with both partners, but also reassuring the partner who's doing the work. If the other partner isn't, then you can only do so much. And the stress of just constantly ruminating about what the other person's not doing is also just not going to be very helpful. It's a minefield.
It is a minefield. Yeah, you need many different qualifications. It's incredible. So yeah. So can we talk about folic acid? Can we just unpick this a little bit? In fact, I recently on I run a more sort of general mentoring program. And one of the practitioners sort of wrote in with a case saying that her client had been diagnosed through a fertility treatment with MTHFR, and sort of that's a whole sort of conversation that I would love to have with you in terms of this. Is this sort of now, is this a test that IVF clinics are now running, and sort of obviously sort of just drilling down on one genetic variant or SNP polymorphism within a huge dynamic cycle is complex. So I'd be really keen to sort of get your view on that topic.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've certainly had people come to me and say, oh, I've been diagnosed with MTHFR, which is like, that's not a diagnosis.
It's not a thing.
Most of us do have a SNP, one or more SNPs on there.
Yeah.
And, it's one piece of the puzzle. It's not the biggest piece, I don't think.
No.
It's not a common thing in the UK for clinics to run these tests, but abroad,
Okay.
it's a thing, more of a thing. But yeah, it's very, I think their understanding is very limited. Once that, it's like that they might run the test, but they don't necessarily know what to do with it or with
Yes.
information. Obviously, there's loads of nutrients involved in methylation, and not just 2 or 3 SNP, not just folate. I think that there's trends in all these things as well. And a few years ago, MTHFR and genetic testing was like really big in fertility. And websites popped up, and it was, and I think some clinics might have cottoned on off the back of that, but it's it's not something that we should ignore, but it's not something that we should focus all our minds on either. And I think that, again, you want to be careful not to chase a red herring. And I think making sure that methylation is working properly for both partners is important, and certainly for men as well. And if somebody's had repeated miscarriages, for example, that might be something I might look into a bit more. But I'm very careful with kind of going down just one route and ignoring everything else. And I think I don't use folic acid if I can
Sure.
help. Sometimes it's been prescribed, in which case, I might run some tests, I might write to the consultant, or I might just leave it depending on the reason why it's been prescribed. So, for example, if somebody's on drugs for epilepsy, they'll be prescribed 5 milligrams of folic acid. I don't touch that in that case, because it's not something that I feel like I'm qualified to even have a discussion about. If they've been prescribed it because they are overweight, I might have a conversation.
Okay.
So it depends on why. So generally, if they're diabetic, overweight, or epileptic, that those tend to be the sort of major reasons why we then kind of maybe run some tests, more in-depth test, and
Yeah.
exactly what's going on. And if we spot something that's actually clearly an issue, we might have to then have a conversation with the clinicians. But yeah, like I said, it's not the only methylating nutrient, and I think it's important to make
Yeah.
sure it's there.
And in terms of doses of folate, do you tend to do you prescribe, no pun intended, is there a recommended dose for fertility that you, or again, is it dependent on all of those other nuanced individual factors?
I think that the research tends to say that sort of 800 micrograms probably
Yeah.
right for a lot of people, up to 1200. I don't tend to go higher than that. I'm quite conservative anyway, but supplementation, I don't think that anyone should be rattling around with pills necessarily, although we do use a lot of supplements for, with our fertility patients. But I try to stay away from mega dosing of anything, and try and use diet alongside as much as I can, and really train people to find the nutrients in the food that they need. And so sometimes I might go a bit higher for a while.
Okay.
Well, if I think that they're deficient, and then we might taper it. But yeah, I personally feel like a baseline is enough, and then we work on the food on top of that.
Yep.
Uh,
And I think most of the people listening are actually practitioners, but your favorite folate foods, let's just, do you have a favorite recipe that you I know Mel has her favorite recipe. I'd love to know yours.
Oh, is it? Oh, I mean, I love kale. I love any
Watercress.
culinary. Yeah, watercress when that's available. Love it. I mean, I'd put it in everything. I'd have it for breakfast.
Yeah,
um, yeah. My kale in my allotment is going crazy at the moment. I love it. It's
amazing.
you can do so many things with it.
But there is an issue with kale and glyphosate, isn't there? If you buy that is a vegetable, but it does depend where you buy it, doesn't it?
I think most green leafy vegetables are highly sprayed if you don't buy it organic.
Yeah, exactly, which is a problem.
Spinach, kale. Yeah, I mean, I grow my own. That sounds like that.
Yeah, no, I love it, Barbara. But you're
I
too young to
I won,
remember to
I
honour
won
Barbara.
bronze in the allotment competition in my local area. So I'm like,
Did you? Oh, I love
floating.
that.
Yeah, but I think definitely try and buy organic, but it's not that hard to find. I think even kale you can't buy frozen, I don't think, but for spinach you can keep it in your freezer. It's so easy
Yeah,
now.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah. Um,
amazing. Sandra, you've been so generous with your knowledge and so helpful. Can you just give a little shout out to your center and just let practitioners know what you offer, what your program is, and how they can go about, and sort of how many times a year you run training? Could you explain sort of how that works?
Yeah, so at the Fertility Nutrition Center, we have a training and mentoring program that is basically 12 modules, and it goes through everything that I've picked up along the way, that I wish I'd had when I started out. And we don't have, I run it once a year, and I think probably we'll run it in the spring. It depends a bit on how many people we get who are interested and when
Yep.
when they want to start. So it's sort of a little bit organic, but there's always opportunity to work with one of our practitioners for mentoring. So if you've got a client that you're thinking I need a bit of help with, I'm not sure what to do with this one, then there's always the Fertility Nutrition Center directory where all our practitioners are more than happy to
Oh,
have a
that's
chat
amazing. That's
for
great.
on a one-off basis. And that's actually how I started. And then I realized that I'm just going to train some people and, just to sort of go out on their own. But yeah, so there's always help available. And you can sign up for the waiting list via our website, which is
Yep.
fertilitynutritioncenter.org.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes as well, so that practitioners who are inspired can know where to find you and get in touch. As I say, you've been so generous, and the work that you do is just fantastic. Just such a wonderful community that you have. You're wonderful ladies that are there. I know many of them as well now. So you've just done an amazing job. Keep doing what you're doing, Sandra. You're a trailblazer. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And we'll look forward to supporting you in every which way we can at Amrita. And we'll, chat again soon. Thank you so much.
thank you.
The views expressed in this podcast are that of the individual and not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors.